Julian, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Keith?
I'm fantastic. And you know why?
Why is that?
Because I've been looking forward to meeting you for months. That's why. Yeah, so today's podcast is a conversation between Julian Melson and myself. And so before we get started, why don't we have Julian introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
So I'm Julian Melson, and I was raised in Phoenix. I work at the Mayo Clinic. I'm a core tech, so I take care of the needs of the OR during my shift. Whether they need soft goods, trays, something sterilized, they call me. So I love my job there. I love interacting with the people I work with. We have a great team.
You know what? It makes two of us, because I love Mayo.
Yeah, right on.
I am all about Mayo. You know, I came to Mayo years ago as a volunteer, and I just loved every second of it when I was there. I got what the Mayo brothers were trying to create there with the nuns back in Rochester, and then they were able to export it out to different parts of the country. So I'm all in at Mayo, and I love the people just like you do. So my role at Mayo Clinic is as a wellness coach, and I get the opportunity to work with medical school students as well as residents and fellows at the hospital here in Arizona. So I love my job, being able to partner and collaborate with doctors on their health.
Right on. So what kinds of things do you do with the dogs?
So what I do with them is I create a wellness class, and it's a HIT class, high interval training. You're super fit, so I know you know all about the importance of exercise, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. So that's what I do there. But I also kind of, with the support of the chair there in psychology and psychiatry, as well as with the support of student services, Dr. Drakowski, and the dean of the medical school, Dr. Halyard, not to mention the chair of education, Tamara Carey, and and Scott Sangla. I have been given the opportunity to create some interesting content that supports wellness. Okay. So for example, podcasts like this. So I work with the doctors in trying to identify doctors who really embody the values of Mayo Clinic, not just in the practice, but how they live their lives with self-care, them living a very healthy life, not just physically, but emotionally, the way they treat others, and so that they can better fulfill on their role as care providers here in the Valley and elsewhere. So what that means is they're very kind in how they treat their staff. They have an openness and respect for all their patients, and they are all about putting the patients first and the whole team. So I get a chance to talk to doctors who are doing that, so hopefully they can inspire other doctors to do the same.
Right. I love that concept, because I think that is a part of wellness that's absolutely necessary, like your emotional wellness, the way you treat other people. And I see it in the job I do. I see ORs that have doctors that are kind of mean and yell, and you see nurses crying sometimes. And it causes like a really tough environment to work in. But the ones who are kind and happy, there's laughter.
Right.
Everybody works as a cohesive team much better, because it is about a team. We're all part of this team. So doctors that embrace that are noticed.
That's awesome. And you experienced that as part of the team working there, and with these nurses who work closely with the doctors. And I know that when I've gone to see a doctor, and when I've gone in for some kind of medical reason, I've appreciated that kindness and that care. What about you, Julian?
Absolutely. In fact, I've been having a series of surgeries for the last couple of years. And a big part, I have a very skilled surgeon that I picked, but in big part, I picked him because he is one of the most genuine, kind people that I've ever met. And I feel I can trust him. Right. Like he's gonna give me the straight story about what's going on. And I feel like he has my best interest at heart. It's not about ego. Right. I love him. Man. Yeah, it does. It makes a really big difference in the experience of the patient and the staff that is working with that surgeon. Absolutely.
Right. That's awesome, man. Well, the good news is we got some doctors at Mayo who are living that. And like I said, I'm so grateful to be able to learn from them as well as share what they're doing with others to inspire them. So I got a couple questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but before I do that, I want to talk to the audience and to tell you how I was why I was interested. Let me start over. I want to tell you why I was interested in talking to you.
Okay.
Okay. So I took this class at ASU, and the class was called Psychology of Gender. And while I was taking the class, I thought I came in with a pretty open mind. You know, like, I love everybody, I respect everybody, whatever makes you happy, do your thing, right? No matter what that is. You want to play basketball, you want to be a rock star, go for it, you know? It didn't really matter. And as I was taking this class, the instructor encouraged all the students to be really open-minded when it came to things like gender, sexual orientation. And I felt like I was open-minded, and I learned even more by coming in with that open mind, and then being in an online classroom with other students who were different ages, different ethnicities, different nationalities, as well as different, their gender identity was all different. Mm-hmm. So they taught me and educated me, man, and I appreciated it so much. So I was so excited about it that I talked to the chair of education here in Arizona, ToBeRe.
Okay.
And I shared with her that I wanted to to further this conversation and learn more. And she said, you know what? I just happened to go to a talk and I met this guy named Julian Melson, and you gotta meet him, Keith. He'd be perfect for what you wanna do. And so I was like, cool, all right. So I hung on to your number for a while. I got some other tasks completed that I needed to do for the medical school. After that, I reached out to you, but before I did this, I did a little research.
Okay.
I wanted research, right? So
did you stalk me?
I did. So I found this video on the internet, and I found a talk that you did. And during this talk, you asked people to put up on the board LGBTQ on the board, and you asked them to just share in a very safe environment what they thought each one of those letters stood for, what it meant to them. Mm-hmm. And you gave them the space in which to do it to where there'd be no judgment on what they said. Man, I'd never seen that before. It was amazing that you created that open space for everybody to be open, to be straight, to be vulnerable. And they did it. And the way you handled all the questions. And then the last part of what you did was you shared your own story. So I was hoping you could do that a little bit today.
Sure.
In addition to that, I saw another video in which you were working with Dr. Jewel Kling.
Oh yeah.
And you were going around Mayo, department by department, educating them on how to treat and be kind and respectful to people of all genders, specifically transgender, people that identify as transgender.
Sure.
So man, totally inspired by it.
Right on. I'm so glad that you got that from what I've done.
Yeah, so that's what I want to share. So that's how I came to know you and how I became super interested in having you on the show.
Okay.
So with that being said, can you share a little bit about, your childhood, as well as, some experiences that have shaped you and what you do at Mayo? But let's start with childhood to now.
Wow, I'm really old, so I've got to put this all in a nutshell. But just, a synopsis, I grew up in a very loving, liberal home. I had a beautiful family. And if you ask me one thing I could remember most about the environment I grew up in was laughter. Like, there was laughter in our home. It was awesome. I didn't grow up with a father, but I had great male role models. Men that were very masculine and athletic, but were gentle and kind. Right. This blend of a person that was an example of a man for me. And I feel very fortunate that I had those
no doubt
people in my life.
I didn't grow up with many of those kind of people in my life. My stepfather was heavy on the masculine side, and he lacked the balance, of having a very respectful, compassionate, and loving, kind energy. So
that's tough.
I'm happy for you, though.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but continue.
No, that's okay. So I am transgender. So I was born in '65, and when I was a little kid, I felt male my whole life, the minute I had an opinion of myself. But I was born with a female body. And the doctor said, congratulations, it's a girl. And everyone was saying she. And I got a girl's name, and that just didn't compute with me, but I went along with it. Because when you're a little kid, we're all pretty androgynous. Grow the hair out, it's a girl, goes short. So I was allowed to be a tomboy. My family embraced however I wanted to express myself. I was a good athlete, so we had a lot of guys in the neighborhood. We played football, built ramps, and I was embraced because I felt like one of them, and I felt received as one of them. So, things got tough for me when I started puberty. Things started changing, and I had the understanding that it wasn't so cute anymore to express myself the way I was. So I started adapting to the expectations of kind of a cruel society.
Like, give an example of like how you started to adapt, to the society outside of your home.
I shut my mouth. I told myself, you better shut your mouth. You do not ever talk to anybody again about wanting to be a boy or feeling like a boy. Instinctively, I knew that needed to be just push it down. There's nothing that you can do. I tried once, I think at 8, to pray. I've heard that God would answer your prayers. I was not a religious person, but word in the street was you say a prayer and ask God for something.
And it gets answered.
So that was my solution. I don't know, I'm 8, 10, something. I don't even know how to pray. I get down on my knees and I told God my address, my first, middle, and last name, and exactly where I was. And then I didn't want a mistake. So he would send the witch from Bugs Bunny with the wand. I don't know why I didn't say, God, do this. I wanted him to do this big thing. So she would wave the wand. I would wake up and I would be a boy like all the other boys. And of course it didn't happen. So I gave him a couple weeks because he's busy, I'm sure. But there was a realization for me at some point that that book lied, he lied. And I began becoming angry. And I would have these outbursts to the dismay of my mother. She didn't know what was going on and I wouldn't talk about it. So. And as you know, that can fester and build. So I've dealt with anger my whole life, and it was a process to get where I am today.
The anger for me, I had a lot of anger and resentment too. The way that mine manifested was a bit different. So I had, my biological father was not in my life, but my stepfather was. And like I said, he was on his own journey, and I have so much compassion for him now because I've grown. But back then, man, there was just a lot of hate and a ton of resentment. And what I resented most is that he seemed to be cruel just for no reason. We would walk out of a room for a split second, leave a light on, and that would result in like a beating. The slightest, I remember my stepfather would get off work at 5 o'clock. And so we get home from school about 3. And from 3 till about 4, I was relaxed. But as the clock continued to tick, I noticed myself become more and more drained of any kind of good energy, and just fear started to consume me because I never knew what kind of day he had or who was walking through the door. And more often than not, it resulted in some kind of verbal or physical abuse. It was a tough deal. And so as I grew older, I felt like I had no one to talk to. I remember telling an aunt or an uncle about what was going on. They were like, hey, Keith, don't worry about it. You'll be old enough, at some point, and you'll be out of the house. I was like 7. I'm like, man, 18 is a long time away to be living in this nightmare. That's how I saw it anyway. And so I learned that the people that I thought would keep me safe and protect me from this kind of abuse would be there. And so when they weren't, I just kind of internalized it all. And I just grew up totally resenting my stepfather. But it didn't stop there. I didn't act out. I still performed well in school. I still did well in sports and things like that. And on the outside, I looked like I had it all together. But inside, Julian, I had made up my mind that I could not allow myself to be close in any relationships. So subsequently, and you may know this, and I think people that have had, who ever harbored some kind of resentment or anger over time, that once they get on the other side of that, they can look back and reflect and say, and see what the costs were. And the costs were for me is that I never trusted any of my partners that I was in a relationship with. And so I withheld love from them. They didn't know why. They tried to get to it, but I couldn't tell them. So they never really got, who I was or what I wanted, and I just kind of really just pursued achievement and goals, to the expense of cultivating any kind of meaningful connections and relationships. So that was a cost to me. What was the cost of the anger that you carried?
So, wow, that's really a broad question. I can't answer that fully, I don't think. I do know that I became very self-destructive. So I had a lot of resentment regarding this because there was no solution.
Right.
There was absolutely nothing I could do. And there's this authentic piece of me that I am shoving down, which of course, as we know, never goes away.
Right.
It's just in there deeper. And I was developing more and more shame and embarrassment about this piece of me that's authentically who I am.
Right.
So I used drugs, alcohol, reckless behavior to, I suppose initially it was to feel better.
Right.
To not look at what was going on because it scared me and I was ashamed of it. So with no solution that I could find, my solution was to party and numb out. And I really lived a life like that for most of my adult life. It was a roller coaster of sobriety and going back to heavy using. And I'm grateful for the times that I wasn't using.
Right.
And I could be my authentic self and nice and friendly, but then I would go use and it would just quickly unravel for me.
Right.
But that was my life. This cycle. There was no career goals. There was no looking forward to the future. I identified as a lesbian early on because I found others who were like me.
Right.
And there was a lot of shame in that in the 80s.
No
we
doubt.
hid ourselves.
Right.
So here are these things about myself that are totally on the down low, and I'm living a lie, and I'm having to remember my lies. So my life was just this cycle of shame, guilt, and fear.
I did a podcast with a friend many months ago, and it was called Useless Emotions, and they were blame, shame, and guilt.
Right.
And they just really serve no purpose. And that's really been true in my life. And there have been cases where I've experienced tremendous shame and also some guilt. I wasn't big on blaming, except for my stepfather.
Right.
But other than that, I was really big on guilt and shame. And the way that showed up for me is if I underachieved, because I made my solution to the anger would be, I got to be successful. I got to meet this goal. I got to exceed the goal. And so when I didn't exceed it, there was tremendous shame over it. So for example, before I got into health and wellness, I was a financial planner. Did really well as a financial planner. And during the early part of my career, the economy changed, the market changed, and this big house that was symbolic of my success, the bank was, asking me to make mortgage payments that my income could no longer support as a result of the economy being, not as good as it was before. And I remember the shame of not telling friends about it. And I had a luxury car. Why did I need a luxury car, man? Now I drive a Prius. I've been having it for 11 years. I love the Prius, man. But I thought I wasn't a materialistic person who was caught up in those trappings, and that I wasn't led by ego or impressing others. But man, when it was time to downsize from that car, Julian, it was painful. It was painful to the ego because I had so much shame around it, because my story was having to give these things up, no longer possessing them, was somehow a reflection of my fall from the top.
Your failure.
My failure, exactly, from my failure.
Right.
So I carried a lot of shame over that, man. It wasn't too many years later that I was able to look at that and heal that part of it, and then start talking about it. I found that being able to talk about it and share is therapeutic.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And the first couple of times I tried to share with people, perhaps I chose the wrong people, because, it was more lecturing, a lack of understanding, certainly no empathy. So it made me less likely to share. And so hence, there's no vulnerability. And I continue to stay in that cycle until finally I found a soft place to land and someone to share it with. How does it make you feel that you can be open and you can share?
Extremely freeing to not be tied into another person's opinion of me regarding this piece. Like you say, my hair is weird. I'm gonna think about it all the time. So I'm never fully free, probably.
Right.
But all kidding aside, this was the biggest point of shame and embarrassment for me in my life. And I had told myself early on, shut your mouth.
Right.
You can never speak of this to anyone. And here I am talking to perfect strangers about details of this issue and how it has affected my life and who I am completely, openly, and honestly.
Right.
And I feel like...
And hold on.
Yeah.
And no judgment. They had no judgment, did they? The strangers you were sharing it with.
So it doesn't matter to me. If they had judgment or not, it's okay.
Man, you really got it. You got it.
And you know what? Here's the thing. Let me
Wow.
back up a little bit.
Wow.
So the person I told you about
Yes.
that was using drugs and alcohol and chemicals to fix this whole thing,
Right.
which was a bad choice, and but the only one that I felt I had. To become that person that I just described,
Yes.
there's something that happened in the middle of that.
Do share.
I had yet another girlfriend fleeing, let's call it what it is. She wasn't leaving me, she was fleeing the scene. And I was wanting to quit using, and I couldn't stop.
Right.
So that realization that this is completely unmanageable, and I do not have the ability to stop. This is my only solution. And now I'm down lower than I've ever been. And I can't use this anymore. Right. I've never been a suicidal person. And that day, 2005, April 18th, I was on my knees in front of this stove of a place I was being evicted in. And I turned the gas on. And I'm on my knees. I'm not a religious person at all. And I've always been a seeker of God or a higher power. And I just was in such despair. I looked up and I was like, God, what do you want me to do? What do you, like, from my soul? I don't even know where that voice came from. I get chills. And I had a spiritual experience. That day, I stood up. I was just going to kill myself.
Right.
So I stood up, dumped the vodka out, I think it was, called the crisis hotline because I knew I shouldn't be alone. And they took me to a recovery place for a meeting. And the principles that I learned in that program, there's 12 steps and they're very hard, if you're being honest. But it made me look at things with a clear mind. And I had very healthy people to help me walk through that.
Right.
So I called out for me a divine intervention. I didn't intend it. I didn't hear a voice.
Right.
But I know there is no way that that person who was going to kill themselves stood up on their own fruition, dumped out their vodka, and made a smart choice and called for help.
A life-changing choice.
It wasn't just me. There was something else on board. And every time I do these presentations, I get chills. It is a gift to me. I've been given this life that I have today. And through the struggle and pain that I went through and the self-inflicted wounds, I created those myself more than anyone else. I hurt myself. I'm allowed to do these presentations where I connect with other people and we collaborate. And before those, I ask God to help me say what you want me to say, help them to hear what you want them to hear, and we connect through Him.
Right.
So for me, I hate to, it's not preachy, it's my own
man,
deal.
this is beautiful, man.
I have, those wounds have healed. I absolutely am 100% sure through the conversations I've had and the presentations I do. And I don't know when, but somewhere along the line, it became irrelevant what somebody's opinion was, or if they accept me as a trans person, or if they think I'm sick, or whatever. I am giving you what I have to offer.
Right.
What you do with it is your deal.
Exactly.
That's it.
You know, I can relate to the exact same thing. I had an experience that was about 3.5 years ago that it, you know, I think people around me who are really close to me, my friends, thought that, you know, man, this could break him, you know, and I know that people that were on the other side of hoping that it would break me, there were people that on that side of it too, and I can honestly say the way that I proceeded through that was I had gotten to the point to where any kind of suffering I was experiencing, I've had enough. And like you had that moment in which you needed to, you made that phone call, you know, you were led to, you were inspired to do so. Something happened within me to where I just really started to commit myself to healthy habits in all areas of my life, not just how I ate, not just working out, and the people that I hung out with, but I committed myself to a daily ritual. And that ritual included a gratitude list in the morning of 5 things I'm grateful for, and I take my hand and I touch my thumb to each one of the fingers, and I list specifically
that's a great idea.
what I'm grateful for. So you know what's
I
going
love
to
that.
make you know what's going to make my list today?
Huh.
Talking to you, meeting
I'm
you.
gonna add it too. That's
So
great.
I do that every single day, and what it does, it takes me out of my head about what didn't go right with my day, stressing about tomorrow and what I've got to do later. So it takes me all out of that and it brings me right back to the present moment. The next thing I do, I got turned on to the Mayo Clinic Guide to Stress-Free Living by Dr. Sood. I started reading it about 2.5 years ago. I've read it like 6 times, but every morning I read a page of that. I'm gonna be doing that for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So I got friends who've gone to AA and they read from it every single day. And I know it's been a great anchor for them. So this is the anchor for me. And it's been just so incredibly amazing for me to do this, to make sure that I stay focused and on the path. And then the last thing that I do is I listen to podcasts. And so I use one of your videos as a podcast, and I listen to a couple other people that inspire me. So this keeps me on the path of doing this work of myself. And like you, I got to the point to where I was unconcerned about what other people's opinion of me was. As long as I was living a life that was filled with loving kindness and that I was being of service to others, that's the only thing that mattered to me. So coming to full circle with the conversation we're having today, I have no interest in trying to figure out why something makes sense. Like, oh, this doesn't make sense, or people don't think it should be this way or it should be different. I come back to none of that matters to me. Is what I'm about to say or do, is it kind? That's it. So it takes the mind out of it, and that kind of dictates all my actions throughout the day. And so, but I continue with the daily rituals because at any moment I could be taken off track, my ego could get involved, and then I'm back to the old, outdated behavior that hurts me and hurt others. So that's kind of what I do, which is very close to what you're doing, man. Tell me a little bit about what you do on a regular basis to really stay in this space of just being kind, giving, educating people, sharing with them how to be kind to others. How do you do that? I know obviously you're fit, so exercise is part of your ritual.
Absolutely.
What else do you do?
So, I'm not as goal driven, I guess, I would say, as you, like where there's certain things, but I do have a regimen, I guess. And I have some things that I do every day that make me feel like I'm on the right track, that keep me focused. And the main one is to turn my will and my life over to that entity that I had that experience with that day, because since then I have not felt alone. I feel that there is, I have guidance. Right. I have a safety net that no matter what I go through, there is a reason and a purpose, and I will be okay. And that gives me like a sense of comfort. So when things come my way, I'm not as dramatic as to how I react or respond to those. Also, what I do that I think is important is, like I told you in the beginning, in my home there was a lot of laughter.
Right.
So I don't know if that's genetic or what it is, but I love to laugh, and I work in an environment that can be very stressful. We have these nurses and scrubs that are giving it their all every day, and sometimes they have to work longer hours, in the medical field, and sometimes they see things that are hard, and I think they are really special people that do that job. So I just do some goofy things, and I make people laugh in an appropriate manner, but laughter, I've heard laughter is the best medicine, and for me that is true, and I feel like my coworkers appreciate it too. And so it creates a happy environment as best as we can. Right. So I don't know where that came in, but laughter is a part of every day at work. I laugh, no matter how bad the day is.
I love it.
We laugh hard, and so I think that's important. I think that's an aspect of my emotional health, and it just kind of happens. So asking God to take my will and give me what He needs me to do for the day. And I keep myself open to opportunities. And I am so thrilled that Mayo is starting this education process for our staff. that is something that feeds me.
Right.
And I love, so yeah.
Yeah, share a little bit about that. Your role at Mayo in this new endeavor that they're doing here in Arizona. Go ahead.
Okay, so a little bit to back up. I was outed when I started at Mayo in my department. I think I was there for 11 months, and I found out that there was somebody maliciously outing me, and that was probably my biggest fear. I didn't let anyone know at work. I was out doing other things.
So when you say you were outed, for people that may not be familiar, so you were showing up to work just like you are right now. Okay, so and then someone shared some very personal information regarding you.
So as I said in the beginning, I am transgender and was born with a female body, and I have done some things to change that and live my life as a man, and it was really hard, and work was just not some place that I was going to be out about that.
Right.
I'm there to do a job, and that's kind of where I left it. So when I found out that I was maliciously outed, everybody knows this about me now probably, it had been going on for 3 months. I now had to go to my supervisor and out myself.
Right.
And I was just blown away. My supervisor stops me in the middle of talking and she says, "This is an HR matter. I am not even qualified to deal with this. I'm going straight to HR." And they did an investigation, and I was very happy with the outcome. And it was a really great thing, like these things that seem bad, that we label as bad.
You know what?
I found out that my coworkers liked me for me. Nobody treated me any differently after finding out this news. I was now able to be part of the diversity group there at Mayo. I'm out. Let's just cat's out of the bag. Let's do this. So I met some really great people through that work. I was able to speak at a conference in Rochester. I had a company credit card. Yeah, it was a big deal for me. But it was great. And I met some great people in Rochester and started getting connected. And so now, years later, I've been wanting this education piece for a long time.
Right.
So now everybody's on board with it, and they invited me to be on a committee. And I'm sitting at this table with PhDs, with nurse educators, nurses that are at the top level of they're going nowhere else. They are made it to the top. And they have all these initials. And I am Julian with some college. So I was a little bit intimidated, but everybody has been so warm and they want my input.
Right.
And I feel really part of this collaboration.
No doubt.
And I am like beyond excited and happy. And the really cool thing too is, so we created a PowerPoint at this training. And I was under the impression I was going to do it with either one of the doctors or one of the nurses on our committee. Well, then one day I find out, no, you're doing this by yourself. And I was terrified. I talk on a human level, my life story, that's easy. So I said, well, I can't do a PowerPoint. That's not my thing. I'm not sure. And the nurse that had made the PowerPoint said, well, this is going to be a challenge and make you get out of your comfort zone. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing this.
You know what? This is like you just described two things that on first look are bad things, but they're really openings.
They are.
The outing, that was an opening. You learned how your coworkers and your colleagues, how they really saw you, which all along is how you want to be seen.
That's right.
And then the second thing is, they want you to give this presentation solo. Another opening for you to grow.
I know, right? So I was just sweating, right? And the first, I won't tell you what department, and I get it, because our department, we get kind of cranky sometimes too. And the person in charge of the groups came out and said, wow, they're in rare form today. I'm like, oh my God.
Perfect.
Are they mad that they're here? And she goes, no, they're just upset about something else. And I'm like, all right, well, so I can kind of relate to that.
There's an audience I'm walking into.
Yeah, but I'm kind of like on an employee, I go, okay, I can relate with that, like frustration or whatever. So it was such an amazing experience, that first one that I did, and I really related with everyone. And what I'm finding is that when I started my transition, there was a lot of fear regarding the medical community. Stories we had heard through the, lineage of us walking through the medical system, and there were some egregious violations of humanity, I think, like telling someone, we won't serve you, we don't want you in our waiting room, these kind of things. So we go in afraid. And what I found from the Mayo employees, from the staff, is that they have these really thoughtful questions and they're invested in the training. And they, I give them 101 in terminology. And I think really by and large, what they really want is, how can we best serve the patient?
No doubt.
What can we do to make you comfortable?
Absolutely.
What can we do to give you the best experience? I love that. I am just blown away. And I feel so blessed to be able to do this. And I'm only able to do this because of that really hard life that I walked through. And on the other side, this is what I get. It's a life well lived, man, right?
Right.
Like all the stuff you took from your stepdad.
Right.
And going, why is this happening? This isn't fair. This is awful. And look at you today, what you're doing with that experience. You couldn't do what you do today.
Absolutely.
So I love that.
You're spot on. You know, I can relate to as you were sharing about the experience that people have gone through with the medical, with the medical field in terms of being refused access, being refused service. You know, as an African American person, I have experienced only a little of that in my lifetime. But, you know, my mom and my grandparents and, great grandparents, they've all experienced that kind of history in our country. And I love our country. But, the truth of it, that's part of our history. And, we can't run from it. We can only acknowledge it, and we can kind of collectively come together to change things. But I remember that, so I can completely relate. Here's an interesting thing. And this is something that I have to share, because I think it's important that, I'm seeing clearly, as well as I want you to see my commitment to showing up better and being an ally. So I need you to teach me this. And so my history is that I am very familiar with the African American struggle and movement in this country for civil rights. And I remember decades ago, when the gay rights movement was going on, and it was really, picking up steam in the 80s and the 90s. And I remember hearing it be said that, that struggle is exactly like the civil rights struggle. And I was like, how is it different? I mean, we're getting lynched, we're getting killed, as African American people. This is part of that history. It's not the same thing. But that's the exact same thing that was happening to people who were just wanting to be able to identify with whatever gender that made sense for them. That was their truth. But I couldn't get that, Julian. And as I grew up more, matured more, I was able to see it's the exact same thing. It's about human beings having the same kind of rights and dignity as everyone else. And so as a result of that, man, I feel even more compelled, more inspired to be an ally for people that are not having their civil rights be honored, be respected. So which brings me to my next question, because I'm so excited about the work you're doing. How can I and other people be an ally?
So you're doing it. Right now,
cool.
You're having me on this podcast, and I really think that is important. I tell my loved ones in my life that if you are out in public and somebody says something derogatory about trans people, I don't pressure them to admonish that person and say, you, blah, 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 but in your own way, show kindness. And maybe in a conversation when you organically feel okay, say, you know what, I have a brother or a friend who's trans, and it's not at all like you're describing, but I think it's important to do it in a even tone. And if I have been in situations where I couldn't say anything because I felt a welling of emotion, and I took things personally, and it was not appropriate for me to respond. So I think just let people know when you feel okay doing that you are okay with me. That I am a human being, and maybe you can talk about this interaction we had.
Oh, no doubt. I've been talking about it already.
Right on.
With all the phone calls
I love it. And so, or just be that welcoming, what I tell staff, the front desk staff, or nurses or whoever are going to interact with us, something really simple that I looked for. And it was a big deal for me in the early parts of my transition, where if I'm going to a new doctor or hospital, I am dying to see that person who looks me in the eye, who's not disgusted, who doesn't look away, who doesn't roll their eyes, who shows me kindness. And I hang on to that person like I have one person here who I can turn to, who I know I have a friend here. I'm not alone. Something that simple, by just treating me like a human being. Do you know what I'm saying?
Man, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, as an African American, this was years ago because I don't feel that now, and I'm sure you feel so much differently than you did
Sure.
a year ago, 5 years ago, and especially since you had that incredible experience with Mayo and HR and how they handled everything, as well as the colleagues that you work with. But I remember as an African American walking into some events that were, primarily attended by Caucasians, and maybe there's one or two African Americans in the room. And literally, I am have some kind of superpower to pick out and scan the room very quickly to find that other person who looks like me. And they may not hold my views, we may not have similar personalities, but I think that person is going to be an ally, and I kind of hang with them. And so I can completely relate to somebody making eye contact, acknowledging you through their eyes, not even really saying anything, but they acknowledge that they're seen and they respect you, and they feel, you feel that connection of humanity, and it just makes everything okay. And like me clinging to that African American person, I'm sure when you walk to the doctor's office and you see someone be that kind, that you kind of cling to them too. Yeah. So it's good to know that just by doing those simple things and making that kind of connection, I'm being an ally.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that there has been this big chasm. You understand minority stress. I've heard it in some of the things you've talked about.
Right.
Walking into a venue where it's all white people,
right,
and you don't know what's coming, and you look for that person that you can relate to.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of us have come into medical situations with this minority stress, this defense, this I'm going to fight for myself, I'm going to stand up for myself.
Right.
And you're dealing with a medical provider who hasn't been given any education regarding what my needs are, or even pronouns, or what's going on. What does that mean, trans?
Right.
So they feel in a position of, I don't know what to do here. Now you have two people defensive, and this horrible chasm. So I think that part of, for me, when I do my presentations or when I talk to people, I am giving you an example of a human being.
Right.
And when I give you raw emotion like fear, shame, embarrassment, self-hatred, we as human beings can all relate to that. And I think it humanizes us and brings us together. So I think the more conversations I have like this, I think it creates more allies. Not just allies, but people who go, I'm human just like you are.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm a person just like you are. I've felt that way too. And some of the conversations I've had after these presentations are amazing. And can I share one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Before you do that, I just want to say one thing. Though that's how I used to feel, but now, man, like you, I walk into situations and I'm no longer concerned about what people think or what their judgments about me may be. And I don't feel that anymore. I'm not walking into a situation, it hadn't been like that for 10 or 15 years, that I walk into a venue and I'm looking for an African American person. However, I will say this, that when someone greets me with a smile, with eyes that show a connection of humanity between the two of us, man, it's so refreshing. And so I'm hoping that my way of being kind to others is that I do the same thing. But now, please share with me that experience.
Okay, so as we talked about earlier, I had a lot of anger, internal anger, and it was on anybody who is being unfair or mean, including people who are prejudiced, people who put down other races or cultures.
Right.
So I do this presentation, and it's at a facility where it helps addicts. So a lot of the people that work there are former addicts who are doing right in their life and all of this. So during this presentation, I'm scanning the audience, and I see this guy who's very uber masculine, alpha kind of. That's a read I'm getting. And he made a couple of comments. We talk about what our feelings were about this community, the LGBT community growing up. And he had some disdain and talked about that. So after the presentation, he said, "Can I speak with you privately?" And I said, "Sure." So we walked around the corner, and he's welling up in his eyes, and he said, "I probably will never have this discussion again, but I felt compelled to talk to you about this." And he said, "I was a leader in the Aryan Brotherhood, and I did some really horrible things, and I'm making my life right now." And he said, "I ran a yard, and I did things, and I knew consciously inside they were wrong, but I had to do it. I was being watched." And he said that, he goes, you can't see the tattoos on my arms. They're being removed. But I got each one of these tattoos by doing something to somebody in your community. Wow. I was just like, how humbling for him to do that, for this man to do that. And I said, like, this is the God piece. Like, this is not me having this conversation.
Right.
And I said, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to forgive you, but I'm going to do that as a representative of this community who's been hurt by some of these things.
Right.
But I want to tell you that you now are in a position to make changes in people's lives and help them to see something differently than anyone else can. You can talk to people that are like you, and they will have respect for you. I can't touch that.
Right.
So please do not live in guilt and shame for what you've done. Take what you've done and make an amazing, purpose-filled life from that.
I love
like
it.
what I get chills like that. I will never forget that.
And you know, and that perhaps became his opening. You know, just like yours was years ago, and mine. So man, thank you so much for
Human
sharing.
connection.
Dude, it's all about it, man. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
You know, I want to leave with one question,
Sure.
and then I want to have you back on the show, okay?
I'd love it.
I got a ton of like just Q&A.
Okay.
And so we're going to share the podcast with others. We're going to get a bunch of questions in, and then you and I'll just do a podcast, and we'll just riff a little bit, and we'll answer the questions. Well, you answer the questions. You know, I'll learn along with everybody else. Last question. What would you like your legacy to be, Julian?
So again, I'm not a goal setter or a planner. So a legacy to me, I'm leaving that up to God. Like I am offering myself up to whatever comes my way. But I think what I say at the end of my presentation, and maybe this would be a legacy, that whatever it is that is making you feel ashamed or a sense of guilt and it's pulling you down, and it's affecting you in a negative way and it's keeping you from happiness or peace, please just know that that can turn around, that experience that you're walking through right now may be preparation for this amazing life beyond your wildest dreams.
Right.
Like, just hang on, because if this can happen to me, someone with no goals or no direction, and I have this in my life today, you absolutely can. So I want people to understand that. Like, if I leave with one thing, please don't give up. Like, it can get better.
Man, thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say this, you know, as now a friend of yours, as well as being an ally to the community, and lastly, as being a colleague over at Mayo, I'm so grateful that we at Mayo have you on our team, because what you're doing is going to transform how care is given to the community. And it is in keeping with what Mayo's #1 core value is: the patient comes first. Man, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.